The kiss stealin', wheelin' dealin', limousine riding, jet flying, son of a gun. What's causing all this? Woo! I'm John Rickton with my review of WWE Evil, Episode 7, The Nature Boy Ric Flair. One of the greatest heels of all time, the greatest wrestlers, one of the greatest wrestling characters of all time. Just gotta ignore all the controversies outside the ring, like harassing flight attendants, needlessly, insanely, for no goddamn reason, and all the drinking, and all the other stuff and everything, and a lot of other things we could dive into that I will not dive into, but check out my review of the Plane Ride from Hell episode of Dark Side of the Ring. If you're really wanting to hear me lay into Ric Flair and being, again, not the best person outside the ring. That being said, inside the ring and on the mic, and how he carried himself, truly one of the best of all time. Let me know your thoughts on this episode in the comments, please. Yeah, this is one of the better episodes of WWE Evil, even though there wasn't anything particularly groundbreaking here. There was some good stuff. I will say that Ric Flair does not sound good at all. All that partying, my God, he partied like a rock star, to the point that you can't really understand a goddamn thing he's saying. It's a miracle that Ric Flair is even living at this point. I even think he's surprised by that. So, his brain wasn't exactly family friendly, as one person said. I will say that Peter Rosenberg, let's hear it for Rosenberg, isn't exactly, the best talking head on the kickoff shows. He's fine presenting a fan's perspective with sound bites here. I don't know why they have that Ron Fuchs guy, or whatever the hell it is. Doesn't he have more minors to comment on and everything, and then not backtrack on that stuff and double, triple, and quadruple down on? If you know, you know. I don't even know who the hell Billy Starks is, but apparently he made a comment about her, and then proceeded to continue to dig himself a hole further and further and further, to the point he dug himself to China. And I mean the country, not the actual person. Now, with that tasteless joke out of the way, he basically, led the glam lifestyle, the glamorous lifestyle in and out of the ring. I mean, he was truly the nature boy. They do go over a bit of his history, and they talk about what led to him basically living, in excess, to the point it got ridiculous. I mean, it got really, really ridiculous, and it's amazing the amount of money that he spent. You got to think about how much money he could have saved had he wanted to. Not always, spend in such excess, but then again, in the 80s, I mean, when you're making that much money, and it's where it's the coke, and the women, you get to where you go crazy about stuff like that. There can be no great hero without a great antagonist, without a great villain, and Ric Flair was that to many people. Ricky Steamboat, Dusty Rhodes. I mean, Terry Funk was the face and Flair was the heel. Or Terry Funk was the heel, Ric Flair was the face. Let me try that again in English. That was a pretty damn good feud, but that was also a weird dynamic where Flair had been injured right after being a heel against Ricky Steamboat. Even though a lot of the crowds were cheering Ric Flair, because Ricky Steamboat was presented as a family man, because you had Bonnie out there. Bonnie, who had no business being in the goddamn wrestling ring, or anywhere near the wrestling ring, or anywhere near a wrestling venue, because she was goddamn scum. Read up on Bonnie Steamboat if you want to know. So, various movie clips, Superman, Scarface, Star Wars, about all these villains and everything. A lot of Scarface love during this particular season. I wonder what they're going to do for season 2. I'm guessing one on Triple H. I'm guessing one on The Undertaker. They could do one on Mick Foley. But it'd almost be impossible to really boo Mick Foley unless you really focus on his ECW run. Flair, he didn't sound good. He didn't sound good at all. I mean, I will be amazed if Ric Flair is living another 5 years from now, even though he's in better shape. Like, he had all that time in the hospital, like, where, it was touch and go. They didn't know if he was going to live. So, he grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, obviously, not Minneapolis, Texas. If there is Minneapolis, Texas, I can't imagine there's much to it. Sorry to dump on Texas for no goddamn reason. Maybe there's a Minneapolis, Kansas. It would be one of the few good things to come out of Kansas. Sorry to anybody in Kansas that happens to be watching, all 5 of you that have internet. Let me stop dumping on the Plains area everywhere, and talk about how his adoptive parents were great for him, but he was a troubled kid because he liked to act out and everything, and he drove to a girl's slumber party when he was in 7th grade, and obviously being in 7th grade didn't have a license because that's how laws work. Well, boarding school it was. He had no fallback plan, so he had to make something work. He trained with Vern Gagne, and he had met Vern because he was friends with Greg back in high school. Okay, cool. You know, we get to find out that a little bit. I would have liked to have heard from Greg Gagne during this. I mean, and this was one of the longer episodes. In fact, this was a couple minutes longer than the Hogan one, I think. Besides the Roman Reigns one, which I'm in the midst of watching right now, so I'll have that review up shortly after this. This, I think they could have gone into a little bit more stuff, but then again, since they wanted to do this, Dark Side of the Ring style in just under an hour, was what it was, and since it's from the Cock and also WWE, along with Vince McMahon and Kevin Dunn doing executive producing, and look, they got to get somebody other than John Cena to do narration. Cena's not bad. Cena's well spoken. His narration doesn't provide shit. It doesn't. Get Dutch Mantel to do this stuff. Not that Dutch Mantel would read this verbiage, but you get my point. He was great doing the voiceovers for Dark Side of the Ring. Get Foley. Have Foley do it. Foley could present some really, really good, insight as far as being a narrator and just on the career. So, early days, nothing about him really stood out. He was overweight. He wanted to be Ramblin' Rickus Rhodes. But he's going to be the first ever Ric Flair. Infamous plane crash going to Wilmington, North Carolina on October 4th, 1975. Johnny Valentine got paralyzed. The pilot got killed. Other people, I don't remember who else was in. It's really, really sad because I know that there were other people in that, and it's just, I get so much info in my head. I know Johnny Valentine was a big one. He got paralyzed. You have to wonder what Johnny Valentine's rest of his career would have gone like had he not been paralyzed. I don't think he would have been wrestling much longer because he'd already been wrestling a number of years. But Flair had his back broken in 3 places while he was in the hospital and also recovering. He had like a back brace, I believe. I don't remember who the promoter was. Was it George Scott? Was it George Scott? It was George Scott or somebody saying you take that off, your muscles are going to atrophy. He lost 75 pounds, so he went from 255 to 180? Something like that? 255, maybe it was 70 pounds. 255 to 185. But he dropped a lot of weight, and that was good. It was good for him to do that. Now, he eventually filled out around 230, 220, 230, and he was solid. And he was always in good shape, but after that accident, obviously his body changed. Like, I mean, that would do it. The fact that he could come back and still have a, miracle run of a career, any kind of miracle run, regardless of how he was in or out of the ring, is just astonishing. Because there aren't a lot of people that could survive something like that. While he was recovering, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers was the inspiration. He started, doing the promos to a nicer guy, couldn't have happened. What's causing all this? All the stuff, all the catchphrases, the glitz, the glamour, the robes. Stories were out, I believe, from Cornette's podcast and from other mid-Atlantic reviews that Ric Flair and Greg Valentine, when they were on top, when they were tag team champions in the Mid-Atlantic area, they were making 150 grand a year, and they had fancy cars, they had the ropes for like 5 to 6 grand, maybe 8, depending on how many rhinestones from the Cowboys that they got. If anybody gets the rhinestone cowboy reference, I will be stunned. But talking about all that, he was a personification of excess in a decade where, wealth and materialism was basically at a peak, the 80s. I mean, I was born in 81, so obviously I'd have to reflect back on it. But seeing stuff as a kid, just even in this little area, you see the amount of people that lived in excess, and no wonder there was like a crash of sorts. Credit card stuff and whatever, because people just got absolutely insane with the amount of money that they spent. The Wall Street, 1987 quote, greed is good. Back when Michael Douglas didn't look like one of the lizard people. And, the upside down in the corner, the bump that he took like that, which he took effortless. I think Ray Stevens is about the only other person I saw on a mainstream basis. And I mean, that's the footage I've seen of him. There isn't, unfortunately, a ton of Ray Stevens footage in his prime, but he could just do that like crazy. And you wouldn't think somebody like Ray Stevens could, but he was just a natural. Flair brought it to the mainstream, doing that stuff. the begging, no, 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 woo, just poke right in the eye and everything. They got Mike Golick for this. I didn't know Mike Golick was still doing appearances. I remember, he used to do some. I used to enjoy some of the stuff he did, and then I just stopped watching ESPN and stuff like that, so I totally forgot about him. Shawn and Charlotte weigh in, obviously. Shawn weighing in, keeping one eye on Ric Flair's career and the other eye on NXT Creative, and Charlotte talking, obviously, his daughter. They didn't get David for this. He has another daughter, doesn't he? They didn't get her for this, but they didn't get David for this. But then again, David wanted to be away from the limelight, which I don't blame him. He was not cut out for wrestling. He knew that. The promos, second to none. The feud with Dusty. The feud with Dusty is incredible. Like one of the standout feuds from the 80s to now. It is something that it's a template for how you could have a dastardly heel and a working class babyface, and you could build that properly. You obviously can't go back to the 80s as far as getting away from the internet and getting away from everything overexposed, but you could apply that to now, and sometimes they have. Punk and MJF, they did about the best they could. Not quite the same, but the same material of it. They main evented 2 straight Starrcades. 1984 wasn't exactly the most well received. That was the $1 Million Challenge, and 1985 was The Gathering. And that had the Midnight Express. No, that had Midnight Express against Miss Atlanta Lively and Jimmy Valiant, I want to say, because 1986 was Night of the Skywalkers. But they had 40,000 people in the Orange Bowl. Dusty and Flair were big goddamn deals. And then we got the foreign menaces. Ivan Koloff brought in especially after Crusher Khrushchev had left after recovering from a knee injury and everything. He was on his way out because they were going to start Demolition pretty soon in WWE. And I might be messing. He might have gone somewhere else shortly after that, or shortly before that. But Nikita Koloff they brought in, big guy, solid. I mean, just insane looking, just a road warrior like physique. They brought Nikita in. And Nikita was attacking Ric Flair. And they were doing some, great stuff here. Then we go to the fateful night of September of 1985, where Flair was being attacked by the Russians in the cage. And then they, and I think it was September of 85. I swear it was a little bit earlier, but they may have messed up the date. So we get we get them attacking, and we get Ole. And we get Ole and Arn in there. And the Horsemen weren't quite formed yet. But Dusty went in to save Flair. And then they got in there. And they beat the shit out of Dusty. They busted his leg, broke his leg seemingly. And nobody could get in the cage. Face couldn't get in the cage. They were playing King of the Hill, fighting him off and everything. And there's footage out there. It's on YouTube, I want to say. YouTube or Daily Mode. I think it's on YouTube. I have to look up the day at some point. But I did see it, and this was a couple of years ago, but God, the fans were ready. They were ready to chew through walls. They were ready to chew through the cage. They were going to chew through the Horsemen. They wanted to kill them. And it took like 30 minutes, an hour to clear the ringside area because they had that much heat. And I always use in quotations because I'm not a wrestler, but they had that much heat. And then the Horsemen were formed. Now, Ole was quickly moved out after a period of time. Luger was brought in, and they had various versions of the Horsemen and stuff like that. I would say Wyndham teaming with them was probably the best version. Wyndham, Arn, Tully, Flair, and JJ. But Horsemen, one of the best factions of all time, easily. They got over huge, and they influenced all other factions that followed. I mean, come on, DX. NWO, all that stuff. Yes, the Freebirds were first. They were the trio. They were this kind of stuff. But still, the Horsemen were what really set the bar on a national stage. So Freebirds, Horsemen. They were the mold that, they broke the mold when they did those, so to speak. And as the days go by, we go to the feud with Steamboat. He was a 60-minute man, Flair said, and all the money, all the women, they bounced back and forth, because 1989 was when Ted Turner had, bought the company a few months prior. October, early November of '88. So at this point, Turner had, and then we flash back to the Crockett days, the private jets and all this stuff. The Hogan and Flair differences. Hogan was selling milk and cookies and steroids and racism, but Flair was also selling, the women, the booze, the glitz, the glamour, and also racism. But that's another story for another day. When you get on Space Mountain, you're going to be like this. And he just, lays on the ground. I'm not going to try to do that here because it'll take me forever to get up because I'm old. But the promos were great. By 1992, he arrived in WWE. He actually arrived sometime in, later 91. I think it was like September 91. And had the big gold belt. They completely glossed over that because he had the, the deposit he put down on it, and then WCW agreed to pay it. With a tear in my eye, this is the greatest moment of my life. Winning the Royal Rumble. Great, great stuff. 100% committed to wrestling, the lifestyle, and everything. It started to bleed into real life to where the real life character, or the real life person, the real life character on screen were blending together. And he was paying alimony to 3 women because he couldn't keep a goddamn marriage and can't keep a marriage anymore. I mean, he seemed so happy with, Wendy, I believe her name is. And Wendy flew back to be with Peter Pan. So Charlotte talks about his life on the road and how after a year and a half, basically, he was told, well, you can leave on top or I'm going to move you down the card and go with youth, Vince said. I'll leave on top. Went back to WCW because they didn't stop calling from the day he left. That's his story. I actually think they probably waited a bit until other management came in. You have to wonder what would have happened had Flair not been part of the 92 Rumble. Wouldn't have been nearly as good as it was. And by the way, 92 Rumble, the best Rumble of all time. You can fight me in the comments if you like, and you can have your opinion as well. Bischoff said that as the NWO blew up and other stuff, he didn't feel that he respected Flair and other talents like him as much as he should have. And the strip down, there was Bischoff, throwing all this stuff. He stripped down to his boxers. They said January 7th, 1999. It was actually late 98, as I recall, because that was right before Starrcade 98. Then Flair had his heart issues. Bischoff beat him, and then they had a match on that particular, or I think it was the next Nitro, and Flair won, and he was now the president for a number of days. And Bischoff was then just a commentator. And then they did the finger poke of doom and all that stuff, but I don't recall that happening. And also, there was no Nitro on the 7th of 1999. It was the 4th. And I don't recall that happening on that episode. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't recall that happening on that day. So, Russo took over. Flair got his head shaved. They ignored the new blood and the blood stuff falling down. And Flair was beat down dramatically as far as, confidence issues. And he faced Sting on the final Nitro. Hadn't wrestled in 6 months. And by God, you could tell. Reliving the last year of WCW was certainly a chore. How I survived, I don't know. Vince called him a number of months later, said, hey, what do you think about coming back to work? Oh, I'd love to. They said 2002 he returned. It was actually right after Survivor Series 2001. I know. I reviewed it. But revisionist history. And then he had the match with Vince in 2002 at the Rumble, and he had confidence issues. They skipped over the Taker Mania 18 match, one of my favorite matches that Flair had in his career, my personal opinion. And Evolution brought new life to Rick's character and brought everything. He did some really, really good stuff there. 05 run as IC champion, lost it in February of 06, February of 06 to Shelton Benjamin, and then Shelton got his mama. The end in 2008, long overdue. In my personal opinion, Flair ended his career a couple years too late. He could still do some stuff, but no man could do the same things for years and years and years like Ric Flair did. And I mean, even Terry Funk slowed down when he got into his late 50s, even though Terry didn't slow down as much as he should have. His last match with Shawn, I'm sorry, I love you, kick. The send-off on Raw, the woo being everywhere, the hip-hop influence, what his legacy is. They briefly touch on Charlotte, carrying on the Flair legacy, and there you go. That's pretty much it right there. So yeah, there was a lot to dive into in this particular episode, better than some of the other ones. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Rickland. I'll see you soon.